play will go under review.
Happy Tuesday evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. Tonight's tagline is home Joe opener because guess what, folks? Week one is almost here, at the very least, a few days away. And a bit of an unprecedented matchup for the Buffalo Bills as they go up against an NFC West opponent, the Arizona Cardinals, who I don't believe have been in Buffalo since 2016, the great Carson Palmer 4 interceptions in the fourth quarter game. Not to dig up old bones, but Bo, I very much appreciate you being here. I'm going to give you the opportunity to intro yourself to all of our fan base who might not have, any familiarity with really much of what this Cardinals roster is going to look like, as well as just what you got going on your end.
Thanks, Joe. Excited to be here. Talk some ball as we get closer and closer to the season opener in Orchard Park. And, we talk about this team every day, the Arizona Cardinals, PHNX Sports on YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. PHNX Cardinals is the show. And, we're breaking down year two of going into year two of a rebuild. And, what could be a big season for Kyler Murray, who enters year one of a big extension that he signed that starts the clock, and as a $230.5 million quarterback. And finally, I think the infrastructure from a coaching standpoint, front office standpoint, and playmaking standpoint, it sets him up for, I think, maybe what could be his most successful season. Talking about, opening up old wounds. Last time we saw these two teams match up was here as the Hail Murray. And it was pretty surprising, Joe, to see the direction of both these teams. Like the Bills took off with it, made themselves a nice little run and continue in the conversation to be, the team coming out of the AFC each and every year. While Kyler Murray and his team fell on harder times, and they had to hit the full reset button, and it was it was a necessary evil. And we start to see, I think, the benefits of that, with them empowering the franchise quarterback, and have they surrounded him enough, to immediately start becoming relevant and maybe knocking on the door for a postseason berth. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, but I think a lot of people are excited about, regardless of what happens in week one, the results, the direction of this organization.
Yeah, and listen, from all the moves that they made this offseason, the one thing I kept saying to people about Arizona was, I will not sleep on them. And especially when we found out it was the week one matchup, because even if the record and maybe some of the metrics didn't look that pretty last season, there were things that you could take away from that team turning over this season with all of the additions they made to say, wow, like they can absolutely build off this. And some of those things had to do with their rushing ability. I believe they were 7th in overall rushing EPA last season, which is still pretty impressive. That got better with the depth, adding in Trey Benson from Florida State. And then you move on and talk about just some of the additions on both sides of the ball. And Bo, I'd love to get into some of those today. But before we do, you brought up Kyler Murray. And obviously, Kyler Murray, it lives in infamy in Bills fan history with the Hail Murray and just that game, which was truly probably one of the most fun games, ironically, of 2020. So just since then to now and really this season, what is your outlook on Kyler Murray, just not only in this game, but really going ahead and what you really expect out of him for this team?
Yeah, I think that the expectations are high, and I think that deservedly so. I mean, you talk about, the run game. I think that the addition of that and a team that really wants to establish the run, and some teams say that everybody wants to have a good run pass balance, but this team is bullish as far as that goes, and establishing that, I think that sets up a quarterback like Kyler Murray well. And when he returned, you talk about EPA in the run game, like that you would be hard pressed to find a team that's better than them when K1 returned last year, and what he adds to that with his legs. But I think, the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, an emerging second-year player, and Greg Dortch finally getting an opportunity. He's got a kind of an embarrassment of riches, and I think a pretty consistent offensive line. So, like, from a playmaking and just personnel standpoint, I don't know if Kyler Murray's ever been in this spot before, but then you get into the play calling, and then you get just overall the head coach really kind of empowering him and understanding that his skill set, with consistent, playing time and putting him out in success will actually probably bode well for you, and you're wanting to stick around as a head coach in this league. He'll hitch
Mhm.
his wagon to him. So I think that this is the offense, especially with Kyler Murray, is going to be the strength of this team. Now, like the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle with him, and I know like this is a polarizing character throughout the NFL, like nationally. But the biggest thing is just, can he stay healthy? He hasn't been able to put together a healthy season since 2020. That season and then the 2021 season, I know where they won 11 games and went to the playoffs and then quickly fell off a cliff. I think that the league started to figure them out offensively, and they just never, played that game of chess back. Where I think now they're more well equipped, and so is Kyler Murray, just because play calling, he's not going to be let down by that and have to put on, the Superman cape coming out of the phone booth and just have to play like that each and every down. I think the infrastructure's in place for him to be successful. So I think like you look at the career numbers, if he stays healthy, I think he easily surpasses those. It's not a
Mhm.
question of the skill set and the productivity. He's always been 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. You got what you get from the ground. He's just a productive player, but it's just a matter of staying healthy.
Yeah, and I think in this matchup especially, you'd be kind of, if you were a Bills fan, hard pressed to say that you're not a little nervous about Kyler Murray's ability to move outside of the pocket and some of the
Hmm.
mobility he has. Because when he's healthy, he is one of the most dangerous dual threats in the league, at least in my opinion, because besides his
Hmm.
rushing ability, he has a great deep ball. And I believe we spoke about this briefly in, I think it was Friday's space the Twitter space where we first interacted. And I remember
Hmm.
hearing you talk about really like him testing that in this game because their offense is very much rush heavy. And when you have Connor,
Yeah.
Benson, and Murray, you kind of want to be. And on
Hmm.
our end, as a Bills fan, despite it being a defense that Sean McDermott does get consistent, very solid play out of as a baseline, rushing defense has been kind of the Achilles heel of this defense. They're a team that does get run on a bit. They're a team that kind of believes that, despite you being able to rush on us, maybe we could stop you when it really matters, and a bend don't break mentality. But this is a
Hmm.
group of dynamic rushing talents beyond it. So I'd love to hear more about your opinion on
Yeah.
both Connor and Benson too, just in this matchup, especially like what your expectations are and how that dual system will work.
Yeah, everybody gets kind of lost in the shuffle because of the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. and because of the arm talent and the deep ball that Kyler Murray, especially in the 2021 season, threw, and hasn't really kind of equaled those numbers before. But lost in all of that was James Conner, 5 yards per carry, so efficient, within the goal line, explosive plays from this rushing attack all throughout the last season. And then with the addition of Kyler Murray, just taking it to new heights. And I think an offensive line, Joe, that is geared up to pound the rock, to run the football. And if you look at this team when they were successful, especially on the offensive side, as they were getting Kyler acclimated to do some concepts that he wasn't really used to, they just got him under center. They handed the ball off and they ran the
Mhm.
ball. And like you look
Yeah.
at Pittsburgh, who is firmly in the playoff hunt, as they always are, they went into Pittsburgh where it's like this was a cold weather game. The conditions weren't
I
conducive
remember
to a
that.
team coming from the desert, playing outside in the elements. And you would have thought that they were the home team and just kicked the crap out of the Steelers and really kind of, I think, establish what they wanted to do offensively. And then everything kind of plays off of that. So that's exciting. And I think that that's something that people are sleeping on because, what they and how the versatile they can be and diverse with that they can be. Like whether it's Kyler Murray in a design run or handing it off, first and second down to James Conner, or giving it to who I expect like Greg Dortch on a reverse or
Hmm.
out of the backfield. Like they're going to be able to be creative with it, or they're just going to be able to like be very transparent and telegraph like we're running the football and we're just going to do it at a high level. You can prepare yourself for it, but we're just going to put our guys versus your guys and see if we can just grind out some yards and put ourselves in a really solid position for the next down.
And that's the kind of offense that you have to be disciplined when you play against, right? And Sean
Yeah.
McDermott defenses in the past have definitely been that way when they faced other really good dual threats like Lamar Jackson, who, when they face him, they seem to set their edges pretty well and not really take the eye candy. But that's also something that I feel might be a little bit not easier, but more instilled, more likely to happen in like week 10, week 12. But we're talking week 1 where there's a lot of adrenaline in a mix of, yeah, we played a little bit in the preseason, but this is now reality and we're getting our licks in. So that's a challenge for a Bills defense that, really has to get really up to sorts quickly and has question marks of their own. And just beyond rushing and having to deal with, Arizona's RPOs and whatever different types of runs they're going to present to that defense, but also now a skill position group that can really take advantage of that, especially if you're talking ramp ups and play action. And I'd love to hear your take. Really, we talked about this a little bit in Spaces too, but Petzing's offense, what Bills fans can kind of expect to see from that in this week 1 matchup, and things that maybe, they've been working to that you're excited to watch for that team this year.
Yeah, this is not a team that is going to kind of overwhelm you or keep you on the edge of your seat pre-snap. Like, not a whole lot of motion, but they're going to mix up the personnel packages. They are going to mix in a lot of play action. Outside of 11 personnel, they like to run out of 12 personnel, and it's like Trey McBride, a tight end that's known for his pass catching prowess, but pretty good in the run game as well. And that, we'll see what they do as far as the second tight end in that 12 personnel package that they ran over 20% of the time last year. Elijah Higgins was a converted wide receiver, the tight end. He's a good player in the passing game, but they drafted probably, the consensus top blocking tight end out of Illinois and Tip Ryman. And I think he only gives you that ability to kind of be that bully run game that they like to set. So, there's that, but, I think also Petzing's going to involve his new toy in Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the X position and, try to maybe open some things up for McBride, open things up for Michael Wilson in the Z, and then Greg Dortch, who's going to probably start in the slot. So, it's not exactly like this, space age, futuristic offense. It's not what you're going to face twice a year there in Buffalo and Mike McDaniel with a lot of pre-snap, but it's pretty simplistic, and they're going to, try to establish the run. And then, obviously when they get you to kind of come up a little close to the line of scrimmage, then, the play action will hopefully beat you with those, really explosive tools on the outside.
And that kind of goes to show you, because we talk so much about the new offensive minds and the different things they do pre to post, motion, all the different personnel groupings. Mike McDaniel having 300 running backs on his roster and 4 wide receivers. But really, you can still get a lot out of the simplistic style as long as you have the skill group to do it and the quarterback to do it. And I find that this Arizona team has made those additions and has all the personnel and all the opportunity in the world to be that this season. So it's one where this really is, again, a true test. And you talk about Marvin Harrison, and I love to also get into that a little more, because Marvin is, to me, he's a surefire thing. I know, when you draft the player, you have your questions. I knew he had no shot. So to me, it was just, he's the surefire going to be a stud in this league for a very long time. And when I was reading about him, I think you had the practice against the Colts and he was matching up, against that defense, which I think is going to be quite good, but he was winning in all different parts of the field. And that's the thing that I kind of worry. It scares me a little bit without Matt Milano, especially to potentially cover if you need to, is what happens if they shift Marv inside and he's working the middle of the field versus just being a true boundary. So that's an exciting matchup to watch, but just again, more on Marvin Harrison, what you're expecting from him, and really in this game too. I know you talked about it briefly, but things you'd like to see on your end facing the Bills defense.
Yeah, that's a lot of what we saw in Indianapolis. I was at those practices there in the suburbs. It was a cool little joint practice event, 2 days. And it's like Marvin Harrison Jr. primarily going up against Kenny Moore. And I know Kenny Moore got paid this offseason, and he sometimes will kick outside, but for the most part has made his money in this league as a slot corner. And Marvin Harrison Jr. had no problem. He was doing it with ease, finding open spots in the middle of the field. I mean, on day 1 of that joint practice, he was 4 for 4 as far as his targets and catches, and making some noise there in the passing attack. And as much pressure as that Colts front was able to generate against the Cardinals offensive line, who have struggled in pass pro, they still were able to get chunk plays in the passing game from Wilson and with Marvin Harrison Jr. over the middle. And that is, I think, something that people weren't expecting. They were thinking, as you said, like down the sidelines, you're going to see big plays from 18. But he also, he's got the versatility to where he can kind of play and run routes out of anywhere, anywhere on the field. So that is going to be interesting to see how Drew Petzing, because we have, like, outside of what I've seen in practice and the joint practices, we haven't gotten a glimpse at it as well. And it's going to be interesting to see how they really kind of utilize their new weapon here in Marvin Harrison Jr. week 1.
And again, it wasn't like they didn't have weapons prior to that. You talk
Right.
about Trey McBride, who emerged as an absolute star last year, and I think will be a star in the league. He gives you the dirty work in the blocking game, but also is just an all fields lineup where you need him kind of tight end. I mean, him in this matchup as well. Can you give me a little more of your insight on what you're expecting them to do with him against Buffalo's defense as well?
Yeah, this was one of those guys that Kyler Murray had experience with prior to last season, albeit, Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense, but they were able to kind of hit the ground running in Kyler's return in week 10 last year against the Falcons. And it immediately turned into a franchise day for Trey McBride and a coming out party, 10 catches, 131 yards. And Kyler looked his way in the eventual go ahead, game winning drive. With a big 31-yard pass and catch. And they found a mismatch that they liked, and they exposed the entirety of the game against the Falcons safeties. And that was something that they continued to lean into throughout the rest of the season. And then, they went to Chicago, and Trey McBride had to deal with Jalen Johnson. And it's like, okay, you got CB1 against your tight end, because they didn't have it. Like, Michael Wilson was coming off an injury, and they didn't have any other true wide receiver one. Not the case anymore. So I think that's something, we'll see. Is it Taron Johnson there, your talented slot corner?
All-pro nickel, yep.
That's going to be a great matchup. It depends on, if that's what they're going to, emphasize there. But if they get, him on any safety, I think that's Kyler Murray is going to be willing to throw his guy's way, and McBride and just trust his player to come down with the one-on-one in that situation. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, 80 catches, 800 yards, what he did last year but it wasn't with as many mouths to feed as they have right now. But I think it's going to be more quality over quantity, and you're not going to see a downtick in numbers for Trey McBride.
Might be frustrating for fantasy owners, but when you're talking about objective as a Cardinals fan, even if it's 650, that's still a productive 650, and just shows kind of the difference in, like you said, quality over quantity. And I love that. And I'm terrified of that matchup. But I do think, Taron Johnson is an all-pro nickel corner. If that matchup is the case, I do have faith in him. But you mentioned the safeties, and the safety room for Buffalo is a little unproven right now with the turnover from Poyer and Hyde. So I do want to know what Sean McDermott's plan is on that front. But switching over to your defense and really Gannon's unit, because that D-line last season struggled, especially in rush defense. And, looking at some of the statistics as this matchup goes, defense didn't do quite well, but obviously a rebuild. I'm not expecting a top 5 unit in a rebuilding year. What are some of the additions they've made on the defensive side of the ball? We could start with the line if you'd like, as to, how they've tried to improve their pass rush and rush defense in this matchup.
Yeah. The defensive line last year was probably the worst position group in the NFL in half a decade. There wasn't any talent on. There wasn't any NFL caliber players. If they had them, they had to kind of emerge and show themselves. Like Dante Stills was a 2023 6th-round pick out of West Virginia. He's shown that he can be a rotational guy, and that's what you get from Gannon. Like if you watched that Philly team in 2022 where he was the DC, 70 sacks, just always turning up the pressure. But they had an elite rotation of an interior defensive lineman that, I don't know if you could ever match it. Like at this point when it was Fletcher Cox, at some point like later in the season, they had added Ndamukong Suh as a rotational guy, Jordan Davis before kind of he fell off, after his rookie year. Like there was just a ton of talent you'd be hard pressed to find at the NFL level. And then he goes to this group, and it just, they didn't have any room to spare, any margin for error, and they ended up losing even the guys that they had as starters at the beginning of the season. It just deteriorated throughout the year, unfortunately. So this offseason, they emphasized, beefing up that unit. And they did, not by the way of a Christian Wilkins. They kind of got priced out for $100 million for that guy. So they spent it on Justin Jones from the Chicago Bears, like $30 million total contract. And then also Bilal Nichols from the Las Vegas Raiders, and then drafting Darius Robinson in the first round, a versatile defensive lineman. Brought back L.J. Collier, who missed, all but one game last year that they like as a former first rounder, And then, as I mentioned, Dante Still. So they've got a good solid 5-man rotation. Nobody's a Pro Bowler on there, but it's elevated that group to NFL caliber players. And that's what you're going to see from that defensive front. And then the edge group is like the status quo. And that's not a great thing. Like there wasn't anybody that was a game wrecker. Like they're led by Dennis Gardeck, who is like a special teams ace, who had like 6.5 sacks last year, and then Zaven Collins, a converted off-ball linebacker to pass rusher. And he's shown the ability to do the things that you want your outside linebackers do, except Joe get to the quarterback. And he's going to have to up his production as far as that goes in order for them to surprise some people this year. But interior wise, major upgrades. As far as your outside linebackers go, you got to get some unique production from some unknown commodities here. I think Xavier Thomas is somebody that could surprise a 5th-round pick out of Clemson. He's kind of got a feel for getting the quarterback, but can he do the other things that they want your outside linebackers to? You get him in coverage, yeah, look out. That's going to be bad news. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but they elevated the defensive front seven, which was a necessity. They just couldn't figure out like the perfect recipe to get it to where it needs to be, I think, going into the season. So it's still a work in progress.
Of course. And a rebuild, again, you mentioned it's the second year of the Cardinals rebuild. Yeah. I feel like they made all the necessary additions on offense, and that defensive restructuring is still ongoing, in process. But they did a couple of things in the draft that I actually really liked, or a few things, a few players I even had my eyes on for the Bills. One was Max Melton from Rutgers, correct? That's where I believe he went to school. Elijah Jones from BC was the other pick who I absolutely loved. I believe, was it the 4th round they took him in, or 3rd, 4th round? I can't quite remember. But then it was DTD was the other safety. And all of these options were players that I really liked for the Bills. I feel like that secondary could surprise a lot of people this year. Even if it is rookies, there's some opportunistic players in that secondary that make me say, like, maybe you don't want to air it out as often as you think you're going to want to. But talk to me about, and I hope I got all the player names right, but talk to me about that group too and what you're thinking about them.
No, I think you're right. It's an under the radar group, and in what do you want to do? You want to play rush, and you want to play cover, and I think that now they've elevated their ability to cover. As long as like you can have the best corners in the league, and if you can't get pressure, you can get picked apart. But I think Max Melton, who will probably be used in some sort of rotation early on. There's a 2nd-year player in Starling Thomas who emerged. And I think they really liked just the jump he made from year 1 to year 2. And he saw significant snaps because it was, the first year of the rebuild, and they had the luxury of playing him a lot. They like what they've seen. And Sean Murphy-Bunting is also one of the steady veterans that they have that they like. So, like, I think Melton's going to be in the mix there. And then Garrett Williams from the previous draft, who was also a day 2 pick out of Syracuse, who the Cardinals benefited from him. Unfortunately, having an ACL tear, he slipped in the draft, but he's a guy that can play in the slot, and I think he's a guy that they might move into the mix to be on the field 3 downs. Defensive coordinator Nick Rawlis said today, like at 100%, he can be a 3-down corner. So they've got like the talent level in the defensive back room. Like last year, we were talking about Marco Wilson, who they ended up just outright cutting him. He was the worst corner in the league statistically last year. And then, Antonio Hamilton, who is a journeyman guy that you always root for, but is he overmatched? Oftentimes he was. Now I think they've got guys that athletically can hang, and I think between Gannon and Rawlis, Gannon obviously is 17 picks in that Super Bowl run season for the Eagles. They value taking the ball away, and in between Melton and Elijah Jones, who's on IR, but he was a draft pick out of BC, and then Rabbit Taylor Demerson, DTD. These are guys that have, a nose for the football. And that mixes with like Buda Baker, who hasn't traditionally taken the ball away. So I think that's one thing that they feel like, hey, if we can scheme up a pass rush, these guys might be able to get their hands on 1, maybe 2 footballs. And I'm not talking about Buffalo just specifically, but like just throughout the season, like, hey, can we get a ball back into our offense's hands by being opportunistic in the secondary?
Yeah. And Listen, if you're talking about trying to be opportunistic, Josh Allen is a quarterback. As much as we love him, as elite as I think he is, turnovers are a part of the conversation. And that's something that
Yeah.
the team is actively trying to avoid. And I think that's going to present an interesting matchup on Sunday, because I feel that this Bills team is going to be far more rhythmic and looking to kind of carve you up in the middle of the field versus just airing it out, given the fact that teams play a lot of cover two and try to make it really difficult. So that group is definitely something I think fans should keep an eye on, just because, again, even if it's young, even if there's question marks, it's a group that I think has a very high ceiling with a lot of athletic guys and really good opportunistic corners, a nice young safety to pair with Buddha, who we all know how good he is. Just really a group that I think will fly under the radar to start, but might make their case known and be a matchup, not just for the Bills, but for the NFC West. And I want to just wrap up your time here, Bo, just by asking you a little more about Arizona and just season outlook, whether it's within the division, because I think the ceiling of your team is one that could actually make a run to possibly enter the playoffs even this season, despite it being year two of a rebuild. I mean, do you share the same optimism, or is there a different path you see for the Cardinals this year?
No, I think that is kind of in line with a lot of people's feeling around this team, including my own. But they have to, the organization, like last year, if you watch the Cardinals games, you saw how hard they would play. Like they scratched and clawed for everything, right? And I think that's a testament to good coaching. I think they identified the type of caliber of player that they wanted to bring in, and for a second straight offseason, they littered the roster with those players. So I think that you're going to, and especially with all the draft picks that they had 12 draft picks, and 10 made the team. 2 of them are on the practice squad. And there's been a youth infusion here. So I think, with good coaching that you saw in year one, and you couple that with an improved roster, you're going to see improved results. And I think that, in an NFC where there's a lot less decided and lot less proven commodities, especially at the quarterback position, than there are in the AFC, which is a gauntlet. I think that, there's a lot of opportunities for this team to surprise. And if they sniff and hover around 500 or can climb to within 500, within the last 3 to 4 weeks of the season, they could be a team that's in realistically in the playoff conversation. But, they got to beat the teams that, they're favored by, and they weren't favored against anybody last year. And that's changed this year. It's now 5. And if they win those teams and then they surprise a couple other teams and play a little bit better in this tough division, the NFC West, they should be right in the thick of things. And I think, as Bills fans know this, with consistent quarterback play, it elevates the entire team. And there wasn't any, there wasn't any expectations for the Rams last year. There weren't any expectations for the Bucs last year. But once they got consistent play from that spot, it constantly and consistently put them in each and every game. And if they can get, their quarterback, Kyler Murray, in the lineup consistently and get play from him across the board, they should be right there, going into the final couple weeks of the season.
And again, I'm optimistic about that offense. It's just an undeniable group of skill position players, and it's going to be on the test for the Bills defense on Sunday when they match up. And I'm just going to ask you this one final thing, and you can talk about offense, defense here, but in your eyes, I won't ask you for prediction. It's not fair to put you on the spot for that, but just what do you think would be the Cardinals' strategy to winning that game on Sunday? If you had to guess maybe the biggest takeaways or biggest things that you could foresee them trying to do to match up with Buffalo, in your eyes, what would that be?
I think it goes to the offensive side of the football. If they can establish the run, if they can take the air out of the football, it just bodes well for the entire team. Maybe keeping Allen on the sidelines a little bit more than he's used to, and really sustaining, going double digit play drives. That's asking a lot from Kyler Murray against this defense, but I think the more that Allen obviously stays on, that's not profound. I think anytime people face the Bills, they want to do that. And then Josh Allen punches him in the mouth with his own, elite play, and it gets out of hand. But I think to overcome some of the unknown as far as the defense, this offense, even though they didn't play together as a group in the preseason, has to click early on. And it doesn't mean, hey, Kyler Murray needs to go out there and make the Hail Murray each and every play. It's sustained drives, and it's really kind of churn clock and put your defense in the best position to maybe enforce Allen off the field, whether it's just them bring the punting team on the field or a turnover, once a half. I think that's just going to be so key for this team to be able to maybe surprise some people week one.
I'm really excited to watch it. Again, it's a very rare matchup and one of two teams that never get to see each other, but also a bunch of skill position players that I'm really excited to see what Sean McDermott schemes up and how you guys respond to Allen and co. But Bo, this was great. Thank you so much for taking time to be here tonight. This excellent insight. I knew when I spoke to you in Spaces, it was going to be this way. And, I'm really excited to just see the matchup and thankful to learn more about your team. I wish you guys the best of luck and just want to give you the opportunity to plug anything you'd like to say to the people here tonight before you got to go.
Yeah, we're just talking cards each and every day. PHNX Sports. Check us out on YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. And really enjoyed the conversation, Joe. And looking forward to some actual football come Sunday.
Can't wait, man. But best of luck on that game on Sunday. And I hope you guys crush it. I know you will on your program. But thank you again for being here. You are welcome back, 3 or 4 years when they play each other again. But or anytime in between, my friend. Anytime. But thank you so much. I appreciate you, Bo.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, friends, it is just myself for the rest of the evening, but no stress. I'm going to answer any questions you feel like leaving in the chat. So if you got anything for me ahead of our matchup on Sunday with the Arizona Cardinals, feel free to leave it. Before I get to all of this, I am going to do one thing. I'm going to take that away. I'm going to make the screen nice and blank, and I am going to let Greg and Aaron tell all of you about the One Pass. And friends, it's an exciting time to be a One Pass member. So listen up. Greg and Aaron, what do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, my friends, if you check out the description, you will see a link to the One Pass sign up. And if you have not signed up already, I would heavily encourage you to do so. For just $60 a year, you get access to all of the great all the great resources that we offer to you with the Discord, which is a lot of fun and engaging in constant conversation, but also access to some giveaway entries. And I don't know if you have been a member, if you're new, if you have seen them on Twitter, but we have been sharing our giveaways on a regular basis. We just completed our giveaway of 2 Keon Coleman jerseys. We are actively in the process of giving away tickets to an autograph signing in Buffalo this weekend that will feature James Cook, Taron Johnson, and Christian Benford, courtesy of our partnership with TSC Buffalo. And we have more exciting giveaways on the horizon. So if you are considering it, I heavily implore you to do so. That One Pass subscription is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have all the resources that we use on a regular basis. It helps our network out, and you get some awesome stuff with it. So if you're interested, I encourage you to sign up. And I am going to go through some of the comments here before I sign off for the evening. And I want to just shout out a few people here. First off, Hobo Habo, I apologize if I said it wrong, so I'm just going to say Habo. Tuning in from Newcastle, Australia, about time for the season. Let's go, Bills. Thank you so much for watching us from across the world, man. I am currently in New York, so really, really cool to talk to someone who is from that far out. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. It is very much appreciated. I can't really think of a different word to say. And then tuning in from Portugal, let's go Bills, from Hugo. Hugo, that is awesome. Thank you so much for being here, man. That is a great, great thing that we're reaching across the globe, and very happy to have you here. And I appreciate this nice comment with love to start. It was an awesome, awesome segment with Bo. I interacted with him in a Twitter space on Friday. Shout out to James. Shout out to Justin. They ran that. I don't know if they're watching right now, but they are, they put that all together, and I got the opportunity to speak with Bo briefly about this matchup, and I knew I had to get him back on the show. So he was nice enough to give the time to be here, and we learned a lot about Arizona, but I wanted to answer a few questions. And Chip, hello from South Florida. Go Bills. Right on, man. I was just in Florida, actually. I could say that now. I already left. But I wanted to answer this one question from, I think it was Patrick a little earlier, which is thoughts on Shakir this year. So I'm very confident in Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir had a really promising season last year. I wouldn't particularly call it a breakout. And I only say that because I think the sample size of his receptions, drop rate, yardage, touchdowns, everything that you got that was an actual tangible positive from him was just a little bit small. And obviously that had a lot to do with the start of the year, the halfway point to the midway point, and then post Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady and seeing the usage change and the emphasis on him change. And ultimately, if you believe in trends, he trended in a positive direction in the second half of the year and really did show out in very significant ways, including that playoff game. And for that reason, I'm quite bullish on Khalil Shakir. I do think that he is just... I think he's going to have a meaningful role first and foremost, but also be one of the leaders in receptions on this team. I think I wouldn't say 1,000 yards, but I definitely think in the 600 to 700 range, but meaningful yards like we talked about Trey McBride for Arizona earlier. I think he's going to be a vital part, but also be able to be lined up in a numerous amount of ways. If you're talking in the middle of the field, on the boundary, really, if you want to use him as a motion piece, I think you could. I'm excited to see him used in the screen game where he was explosive. And I think they're going to do more of that with him this year, even though it was just a pivot from Dorsey to Brady. And maybe some of the concepts might look a little different this year. I think Khalil Shakir will be a part of what they do in the screen game. And with the reliable hands, I'm really, really pumped to watch this kid. I hope he manages to be one of the starting slot guys. I think he will, because I think Curtis Samuel is going to be moved around a lot. So I'm quite optimistic about Khalil Shakir. I am looking forward to seeing what he does this year. And I kind of want to just take that because I'm waiting. If anyone else wants to drop anything, feel free. But also shout out to Jamal, who says Bills winning on Sunday. I love that optimism, and I think it's going to be the same thing. But I think that this receiving group, and I've talked about this on the show a few times, but that did jog my memory because I wanted to get to this on the show tonight. But I understand the question marks, right? And I think it's perfectly fair to say that this wide receiver group is unproven, that they haven't, a lot of these guys are either new bodies, might be a little bit older, or maybe there's an emphasis on guys that, haven't played for the Bills before, like Curtis Samuel, Matt Collins, Keon Coleman, and you're hoping it pans out, but there's a lot of ifs in the room. I agree with you, but I think it's important to remember that just looking at the wide receiver room in the vacuum, in my eyes, isn't the way you should evaluate this entire offense. And what I think happens is we've conflated just the wide receiver room to a total offensive regression because they don't have Stephon Diggs, because they don't have Gabe Davis, and because they have to fill the target share. And I completely understand that. And I have my questions too that I hope get answered on Sunday. But one thing that I think is important to remember is the design of the room is always in tandem with the rest of your offensive philosophy, right? We're not talking about they build this receiver room up with no plan, at least if you have good to even just decent coaching. They're building this room with the idea that it's going to work in tandem with their other positional groups to be effective when they need it to be. And if you look at how Buffalo has constructed the rest of this offense, I think it's fair to be more optimistic than you've been in years past. I want to see the receiving room address itself. I do have some questions. I do have questions about Joe Brady's first full year as play caller, what that's going to look like. How does he handle adversity? What is the difference between what that second half of last year looked like versus this upcoming season? But I look at the other rooms and I look at kind of the idea and guys like Eric, Anthony, and plenty of people, Joe Marino, like a lot of people in our sect who I would very easily call significantly smarter than myself, all allude to similar trends in what Joe Brady could potentially do. When are you talking about still sticking in the 11 to 12P, but maybe a small uptick in motion, maybe adding in the play action and under center runs? Those changes paired with some of the other things they've done to this offensive group make me a bit optimistic because I look at the quarterback room and I look at who you have, Josh Allen, who can elevate players around him and has done so pretty much since 2019. I look at this offensive line, and even though I do think last year was a little bit better on the depth side, I still think it's a foundation of youth, really really high upside athletic players that Aaron Kromer is coaching, who I think is one of the best positional coaches in the league. And we are fortunate enough to watch so many of his developmental projects pan out. And even with the uncertainty that comes with the McGovern slide to center and Edwards manning that group, I still have a lot of confidence in this group's pass blocking ability, but also their run blocking, which I think is going to be a huge part of what they do. Add in the tight ends, who I think are all capable blockers, with Knox being good, Kincaid developing and being willing, Quentin Morris being good at it, but also having the hands to be formidable as a receiving group. And then the running backs, which I can make the same case for, maybe outside of Cook's blocking, all have hands, are all able to catch the ball. And yes, James Cook has dropped a few passes, but is still one of the most explosive running backs at receiving in the league. So, I mean, I just find that there's a lot of doom and gloom about this receiver group right now. There's a lot of doom and gloom about maybe the season because it might look a little different. I think it's fair to say that this team, in a preseason on paper perspective, might not generate as much excitement because there's a lot of changes, but I also think that we should see the finished product. And there's a lot of reason there's a lot of evidence given some of the positional group changes for me to say, I think this offense can be just fine this year, be able to still be a top 10 group, both in rushing and passing. And we'll still see a Bills offense that we can go out and just be like, yeah, I'm excited to see it. I think they're going to be physical as hell too. So I'm looking forward to that, but I'm going to cap off tonight's show by just going over this matchup a little bit more and some of the things I'm excited to watch on both sides. And I'm going to start out with this Buffalo Bills rushing attack, specifically against the Cardinals D line. And as Bo alluded to before, the group did add some players, but I still think it is a group that really has to prove itself. And I don't know if they're going to do so, at least immediately. I think that, again, the physicality of this Buffalo Bills offensive line is going to get a lot of respect this year. I think the second half of last year proved that they're capable of doing so and really being maulers in the run game, especially when they do, all the different things they do in their running attack, like duo, or maybe some of their tackle wrap, where they're bringing guys across and just getting acceleration to go downhill. I think that this Bills rushing attack is actually going to eat in this game. Like, I'm very, very confident in that statement. So naturally it won't happen. And you can come back to the show and call me stupid, but I'm excited to watch that. I'm excited to see James Cook, but also Ray Davis and mixing in Ty Johnson and how they try to manipulate that. What looks Arizona decides to show as a result of it, if whether they start the game with more stack box looks, or maybe they go with the lighter box and the Bills punish them for it because they're threat by Allen. But if they do make that adjustment and try to stack the box, I still think the Bills can be successful in their rushing attack and also give Josh Allen the opportunity to ball fake and get some space, and you're going to get some explosive plays out of it. So that is one thing I'm quite excited about. And then flipping it over to the other side of the ball, the Buffalo Bills front seven against Kyler Murray and co. We talked about that rushing attack that Arizona has. James Conner, Trey Benson, who is a rookie, but I think Trey Benson is going to have a good future in this league, eventually inherit that role from James Conner when it's time for him to move on from Arizona. And of course, Kyler Murray, who's one of the most menacing, threatening outside rushing quarterbacks that is really in the league when he's healthy. That's a huge test for your front seven, especially one that just lost Matt Milano. And now you're talking about, well, damn, can Dorian Williams kind of recognize it, process quickly, and trigger quickly and be able to get downhill and bring down a running back? Or are we going to talk about lapses in judgment, slow processing, and all of a sudden the extra step that these guys can get becomes a little more detrimental and more consistent? So that's a matchup excited to watch, but I have a lot of confidence in the Buffalo Bills interior D-line. I think they can match up really with any offensive line in the league as long as they're healthy. With Ed and Daquan Jones, I think if you can push the pocket from the middle, your edge rushers are very good at containing, and I think keeping Kyler in that little force field and not letting him get out is imperative. And I think if you could start from that, you can work your way to the rest of the room and have some success. So that's a group I am excited to watch. And I'm excited to watch the secondary, even though there's a lot of question marks. Mike Edwards is healing up. Cole Bishop is healing up. I don't know if Cole Bishop will play week one, but I do think Mike Edwards will. And I know DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp and Cam Lewis are other guys there. I'm excited to watch it because I'm like a nervous excited. I want to see what it looks like. I just want to see what the communication looks like, where these guys are in their spots, whether there's lapses in communication and people end up wide open. If there's, tackles that are being missed, or maybe like slow triggers that end up getting them out of sorts and they take bad angles, things like that. I don't know what to expect from the safety room. So I'm a little nervously excited to see it, but take it to the corners. I'm very, very excited about that room. And on this show, you guys saw me a few weeks back express my concern for Elam's development, for Jamarcus Ingram's development, and how those things would factor into my outlook on the cornerback room this season. I said I needed Kyer Elam to have a good camp. I needed Ingram to have a good camp. I like Douglas. I like Benford, but I need the depth to hold up. Right now, I am much more optimistic, and I think it is because Elam did have positive signs during camp. There were inconsistencies in his play. There were penalties. There were holds, all these things. But there were also mixed in some really nice drives, some really good ball hawking and awareness and being able to jump on routes and jump on passes and look like a professional corner. And I think that maybe the pairing of him and Adai helped him. And it could help him throughout the season. And the physicality Elam brings, the athleticism he brings, the things he's able to do really boost the floor of this room. And I'm also quite excited about Ingram, who had a really good camp, really good preseason showing. And in the limited amount of times he's gotten an opportunity with McDermott, did well. And now he's getting an even bigger opportunity because he's going to be probably your CB4, not a starter, but still able to come in a pinch and be able to main that boundary and maybe play some nickel as well because he has that experience. So I'm pretty optimistic about that cornerback room, and what a better test than dealing with the phenom rookie in MHJ, Trey McBride, who I think Tara Johnson would probably get primary responsibility on, and then, of course, Michael Wilson, who I don't think is a sleeper, but, someone that I don't think you need to double, but still a downhill threat, downfield threat, someone that could command some passes from Kyler Murray and someone you got to respect. So those are really the biggest matchups I'm excited about. I obviously could talk about Josh Allen for another hour and a half, but I'll keep that brief and just say I need to see Josh Allen's, mechanics really pay off. I talked about that a few weeks ago, and I talked about how I thought Josh's mechanic refinement would help him a lot this year, especially with a lot of uncertainty around the room and how much he needs to elevate these guys around him. Truth be told, I want to see it in action, but based out of camp, there were some things he was doing, some throws he was making that looked a lot more promising. And I think this is the opportunity for him to go out there on a field that no longer has Gabe Davis, no longer has Stephon Diggs, and still deliver a high quality performance where you could turn around and say, we're in good hands. And I mean, you should still be saying that anyways, but it's always nice to kind of see your quarterback go out there and prove it and maybe stick it to him in that way. So that's really all I got for you guys tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. I appreciate my guest tonight, Bo Brack, for being here. Again, if you haven't ever given him a follow on Twitter, I suggest you do so. I think it's always good to just follow some of the contemporaries around the league. And he is really knowledgeable, reporter for the team. He told me he was going to be, talking with some of the guys tomorrow about this matchup, so you can learn some insight from them. But great guest, great segment. Definitely want to get him back on here, even if it's not about NFC West ball, but awesome time. And for me, my name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. I am very, 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 very excited for this matchup on Sunday, folks. We've waited a long time. Obviously, another divisional round loss made us a little antsy for this offseason. A lot of change, but listen, it's football. Have fun with it. I think this team is going to be in good hands with Josh Allen. I think this team is still going to be competitive, still win games, and still give us, a lot of reasons to be optimistic on Sundays, Mondays, every day of the week now that NFL's changing shit up. So let's just enjoy it, man. Enjoy football being back. Enjoy your Sunday. Have fun. Put out a bowl of chips and some salsa, whatever you're feeling, and just let's celebrate the fact that we get to watch our favorite game today. And hopefully the Bills can come out with the win, because it turns around pretty quickly where they have to go to Miami on a Thursday night. So we don't really get much of a break, win or lose. And I'm pretty excited about that. So that's it for me tonight, guys. Again, at @show_DeRosa on Twitter /X. I encourage you all to sign up for the One Pass if you have not done so already. I know this was a bit on the briefer side this week, but sometimes gotta let it go slow. Or not go slow, go quick, not go slow. I don't know. That's it for me. My brain's fried. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Again, follow me on Twitter. Check out the One Pass description. And as always, go Bills. We will see you soon. Have a great rest of your night.